And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us. And one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it. And that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon. Tonight I'm joined by my guest, Will. Will, thanks for coming on here and talking to me.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Would you like to let the audience know a little bit about yourself before we dive into it?
Sure. I am an author, a public speaker. I'm a food critic and also the world's foremost authority on the window man state. And I guess the reason I'm the foremost authority on that is because I'm the only one that I know does it.
Before we get into the window man aspects, I had a couple of questions like leading up to this. Is this something that, how did you figure this out? Like, without explaining everything right off the bat, was this something that just kind of happened, or was it something that like progressed into it?
Well, certainly it was a progression, but there were these precursors and things that led me along the way to finding this. And like I've said multiple times in other things, that I have never been normal. Uh, from the time I was born, things were different. I potty trained myself at 18 months. At 2 years old, I could hold a conversation with you at the level of a 12-year-old. By 3 years old, I began to see things before they would happen. It was extrasensory perception, ESP, people call it. And I lost the connection to that as I went further along. But then there were other things that came. And so I recognize that now as a precursor.
So I guess we'll get into it in a second, but was there like a catalyst that kind of got the whole thing for you, like some sort of event, without like describing the whole thing before, but like, was there something that just set it off?
Sure. When I was 9 years old.
Okay.
When I was 9 years old, there was an event in the classroom. We'll get into that. And that is where everything began.
Okay.
That was where it started for sure.
Okay. Well, if you're good to go, I will turn it over to you and we can get into it. And if I got any questions, I'll ask as we go along.
Sure. Why don't we just start with that event right there?
Okay.
When I was 9 years old, I'm sitting in the classroom, and I'm not the guy that I am today. I was obviously today I'm, speak in public and do all of these things, but I was a really timid kid. And so I'm sitting in the classroom and I have to pee, and I have to pee like nobody's business. I mean, I got to go bad. And I didn't want to raise my hand because I felt like if I raise my hand, then I'm going to get ridiculed by the other students. And unfortunately, that backfired in a really, really horrific way. About 10 minutes later, after I should have raised my hand, I'm sitting there and I just got piss running down my leg. And now the teacher, there's a million things the teacher could have done, but she didn't try to disguise it in any way. So she just exposes it to the class. And now there's this huge, like, uproarious laughter going on in the class. And she's laughing herself, which I found to be a little bit ridiculous that she would be laughing, at a student. But she was. And I should have probably went home that day. I didn't. I decided to stay at school. I went to the locker room and I took a shower, changed out, and got my gym clothes on, and came back and continued to be picked on for the rest of the day. And I'm talking about punched and kicked, and you name it. It was happening to me. People were calling me all kinds of names that you could, possibly imagine a third grade kid would call
Right.
another third grade kid who had just pissed his pants in front of the class. So anyway, I go home that day, and I don't even know what to do with myself. I go to my room and I just start crying my eyes out because I'm thinking, I don't know, what am I gonna do with my life now? I mean, this is like everything feels wrecked at this point. And I'm sitting there, and I should have probably or I feel like I was let me explain it like this. I didn't feel like I was crying myself to sleep. That's not what happened. I was 100% awake, and I was crying. I was conscious of what was going on, and all of a sudden, just like a snap, just like that, I'm out. And I don't know why that happened at the time. I obviously was like, why did this happen? That I just went out like that. And I woke up what felt like maybe a second later, uh, but it was the morning, and I felt fully rested. And this was the first time that I experienced what I call the window man state. Because when I opened my eyes up, I was viewing the world through a different lens. I wasn't viewing it like you or I would view it now. It's like I'm looking and I feel like I'm peering out through a window, and I'm in no control of anything. I can't move my body, anything. It's moving for me. It's doing everything for me. Uh, and all of a sudden I hear my mother's voice call from the other room, and all of a sudden I start getting dressed really fast, and I run out into the living room and I see her, and I just grab her and I just throw my arms around her and I just start bawling. And my 9-year-old self inside watching this, like, I don't understand what's going on, not one bit. So I'm lost. What's happening here? I get in the car with her. I'm sure she was a little shaken by it too. She didn't know what was going on. Um, but we get to the school, and I don't say a word. And I get out of the car. I look at her and I say this. I say, "Don't worry, I'll be back." Which is a really weird thing for a kid to say, But that was what was said. So I go into the classroom, and I see this kid that I called my tormentor in the book, and he's sitting at the back of the class, just cracking up, walking the room. Now I look at him, and I don't feel like I'm feeling it normally. It feels like this is something that's not happening to me at all. It feels like it's happening in a different place to somebody else. And my body starts moving toward his desk. And another kid that was giving me a hard time, he steps in the way. I just push him to the ground. And I walk to his desk. I grab him by the back of the head and I slam him face down into the desk. And now there's blood everywhere. He didn't break his nose, but there was a lot of blood. And so I go to the principal's office, and he immediately starts in on me. He starts yelling at me really, really fast. And I think the reason he started yelling at me like he did was because he felt comfortable doing so, because I'm this timid kid that, isn't I'm not a fighter. I'm not,
Right.
anything like this. I'm not going to argue with him. And so he starts in really hard on me. And I pause for a second. And then this voice rises out of me. And I'm telling you, it had authority to it. And the voice rose out of me and it said, "Hey, what kind of man allows a child to be kicked, punched, beaten, and tormented on a daily basis, then has the audacity to give this kid a hard time when he only attempts to defend himself?" And I watched this guy like step back, and he steps back, he takes a deep breath, and his face almost completely goes white. And he realized that there was something going on there, because this wasn't, the normal child he was used to hearing from. And he looks at me and he says, "What would you have me do?" There's a day that a principal of a school asked a 9-year-old kid, "What would you have me do?" And I looked at him and I said, "Here's what you do. If the parents squeal about what happened, you tell them all about their son. And you tell them that they could be dragged into the very same lawsuit that I'll drag this school into. So this goes away." And just like that, I never heard about it again. And the reason that my mother in that scene had happened that morning, and that was so weird, was because I I realized many years later what had happened. And at this time, I didn't know. But what had happened was this was the first time that my 48-year-old consciousness had stepped in for my 9-year-old self. So this was my 48-year-old self speaking to the teacher, but the reason, or excuse me, the principal, but the reason that the scene had happened with my mother was because to my 48-year-old consciousness, my mother had been dead for over a year. And so now this is me seeing her for the first time after it's so long when I hadn't seen her. And now I'm seeing her in her 30-year-old body. And it was mind blowing. If you could imagine what that would feel like,
Mm-hmm.
experience something like that. It so that this is where everything began.
My door just opened up by itself, so it kind of weirded me out a
Oh,
little
we
bit.
got some paranormal stuff going on in here, don't we?
Yeah. Probably didn't shut it all the way, we'll just say, but no, I heard a creaking. I looked and it just opened up, but it's whatever. So now, when you were 9 years old, and you said your consciousness was from your 48-year-old, so basically 40-year difference.
Mhm.
Did that consciousness stick with you from that point on, or
What do you mean by stick with me from that point on?
like,
As at 9? No.
yeah, okay, like it basically like your consciousness took over as the 9-year-old, but I was just wondering if it's kind of just stayed with you since then, like you still had that idea from your older self.
No, it stepped in and left.
Okay.
And so there were many instances of this over time, that we'll get into and talking about like what it was that stepped in certain places. But yeah, no, that wasn't. It didn't stay with me. No.
When when it first happened for you, like did you feel different? Like did your body feel different, or did you feel anything different when this was going on? Or
Oh yeah. I mean, as I explain it, seeing through the window is much different than like controlling your body. It feels as if you're just watching out of the window, and you know how you can see everything that goes on outside, but you're in control of nothing when you're looking through a window. Like whatever's going on out, the birds are moving, whatever's happening, you don't control that, and that's exactly how this was. I couldn't control anything, not function, not speech, nothing.
when did that first like after you with the principal and everything, how much longer until you kind of came back to not being in that state?
That w- that went away as soon as I stepped out, and you
Okay.
you find out how I stepped out later. If you read in the book, you'll find that I have to connect multiple senses to an event because essentially here's the way that it is. We are the microcosm of the macrocosm. So there's a version of me that has never started talking to you yet.
Mm-hmm.
There's a version of me that is already finished with this interview. See, so there's multiple versions and they're split seconds off. And since they're split seconds off, it's like if you can connect yourself to a moment, then you can essentially commandeer the vehicle. You can take over that vehicle. So what I'm saying is, have you ever heard a song
Mm-hmm.
and that song kind of took you back and you were like, whoa, like I almost feel like I'm in that moment. That's a baby step through the door. And because I have this window man state, this thing that I can do, um, I'm able to step through the door, and many people would not be able to step through the door. It's a supernatural gifting, and each of us have them, but most people don't know how to access them. And so that's actually what I'm doing now. With I'm on school, and I'm actually teaching people how to access their supernatural gifting because it's there. You just have to understand how to get there. And there's a lot of things that bind you from ever getting there. There's these things I call frequency binders, and they keep you from ever being able to move to that state.
Door's moving again. It's kind of creeping me out at this point. Uh,
This happens with me.
do you think that the way this sounds, it's almost like
Mhm.
trying to think, like almost like not so much multiverses, but kind of in a sense like different versions of reality, different versions of time, like a different time and space between when you and I have already talked, another time where we haven't talked. Is there a way for you to communicate with yourself from a
Mhm.
different time frame?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, I should probably explain this before we even go into that and how deep that actually goes, because that's a very deep rabbit hole that we would be looking at there. Um, but I want to say, and this will probably blow some minds out there, but Elon Musk had said that there was only like a 1 in a billion chance that we were living in anything but a simulation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go ahead and take it a step further and say we 100% live in a simulation. And what I do exploits a glitch. And this glitch allows me to move through not only my own timeline, but multiple timelines. And because there are all these different coded versions of the Matrix, and I have moved through many of them. And there's something called an empty timeline where nothing exists on the empty timeline. No birds, no squirrels, nothing except plant life. And in that place, I'm actually able to commune with other versions of myself who have the same gifting. And we are able to devise plans and all sorts of things to further this gift.
I will ask the question that I know everyone's thinking. How come you have not won the lottery?
You know what? That is a beautiful question. And I will tell you why. When people read Window Man, they will understand that time tends to attack, and it acts as an entity. So it attacks you. And I've learned later that there's something called the darker force. And that's what Window Man 2 is about. It's called the darker force. And the darker force has the ability to suppress the abilities. And also, time itself, acting as an entity, looks at me as a parasite, and it wants to flush me out. So, if I use the gifting in any way to do anything that profits me, I'm attacked viciously. In fact, it talks about it in the book where I had compound fractured my leg immediately after winning on DraftKings. That I had won $100,000 on DraftKings, and my leg was compound fractured within 30 seconds.
Hmm.
So there is something that stops me from ever trying to use it for profit.
Okay. So I know
Mhm,
the listeners out there and people hear this before because I've had someone say they've traveled time and everything, and everyone says the
mhm.
same thing. Like with psychics, if all this is real, how come they haven't won the lottery? If they know what the future holds, how come someone isn't rich? And like, it is one of those questions that it has to be asked because, again, that's the way everyone thinks.
100%. And if you think that that wasn't something that crossed my mind, in the book, it talks about, hey, I could go back and I could find this stock that exploded. I could go and bet on Mike Tyson versus Buster Douglas.
Right.
All of these things, and yeah, I definitely that it comes in, and there's this greed that makes you want to do that. But I found out in the most vicious way possible that you don't want to do that.
You mentioned something about time, like as an entity, as an actual physical or
Mhm.
type of a thing.
Yeah,
Because we don't see time as that. Like, we don't see time as anything other than just time. So if this is
right.
something that has like an actual control to it, like a mindset,
Mhm.
would that be considered part of the programming? Like it's almost like a coded protector for the timeline?
Yeah, and I actually think that that's almost a given in the book when you look at it,
Okay.
because the fact is that it it tries to attack and it tries to kill you, but there are all these rules that seem to be in place. One of the rules is that until you reach a certain point, it's not allowed to attack you directly. That it will only attack those around you. But at some point, it starts to look at you as being on par with itself. And when that happens, it starts to try and kill you. And it took quite a long time before it actually started trying to kill me, but it did, and on multiple occasions.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Now, because we've kind of went down a rabbit hole of simulation theory. So, what happens if you were to die, but there's other versions of you? Is just this version the only one that would die, or would all of them die too? Or do you have no idea?
No, this version is the only one, and there are multiple versions of you dying every day.
Mm-hmm.
We are all on this stream, and if you just look at it like there's a cliff at the end, and slowly but surely versions of you are going over the cliff. That's how it is. So we've all died multiple times, and we I'll even tell you this, that we do come back. This is what happens. We come back into the stream every single time, over and over and over again. So the idea of reincarnation, all of that is factual. And I'll also say this, I think it's important and imperative that I say it, that you know there's a lot of believers out there, people who believe in God and all of these things. And I will tell you that nothing that I'm saying is mutually exclusive with the word. There, all of it's true. It says that to be absent of the body, be present with the Lord. How long before you go back? You know, and that's like I said, if you ever have any questions like that you want to ask, I'm more than happy to answer those too.
I had a couple notes as kind of what I'm reading through, and
Hmm.
one of the things I was curious about when you mentioned, like when I originally went through this, when it comes to like your consciousness jumping through time,
Hmm.
we've kind of already alluded through some of this, but it doesn't cause like a paradox type of a weird time shift or something between the fact that you know that you're communicating with yourself from a different time frame that doesn't have any sort of negative effects or anything on you.
Time works very different than people believe it does. And we believe in the butterfly effect, and that if you do something here, that it moves forward,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's not really the case. One way that I would explain it would be like this: if I cut off the blood flow to my leg, right, is it only my leg and my foot that are affected? The answer is no. That's going to put a strain on my heart. It could cause me to have a heart attack, and it could cause me to have a stroke, right? These things happen in the heart and in the brain. So, what I'm saying is that when you affect time, you affect it both forward and backward. It's a retrocausality. It's something completely different than what people believe to actually be reality as far as time goes. Time is much, much different. And time now is in flux. And in being in flux, you may believe that you've lived this life and it's been what you've had from the very beginning, but it can change at any point. And when it does, you will believe that it hasn't changed.
Hmm.
So, yeah. So it's because you'll still have all of the memories of what you believe has been your life, but it has shifted multiple times because time has been affected, and it's affected in both directions, and it's constantly in flux. And you hear about this in the book as well.
How did you come to understand all of this? I know we've kind of haven't really got further past your first experience, but how long did it take for you to kind of understand what was going on?
Oh, this was so many years in the making.
Okay.
One of the ways that I've explained it on a few occasions is to say, you start getting in shape, and then you go, oh, you know what, I could probably box, and then you start boxing, and then you're like, hey, I can start kickboxing, and next thing you know, you're doing jujitsu and wrestling and all these other things, and now you're a complete mixed martial artist. So what I'm saying is that this was a development over years and years and years. And when I'm inside in that window man state, I have been able to map the brain and do many, many things that people don't actually understand. Um, Things go on inside that you can never explain out here. Um, I ended up being inside one time for 6 months, and it felt like this because 6 months, 6 minutes, relatively the same inside if you're not actually looking through the window, which is why I had to learn to look through the window. Because if I wasn't constantly in the window, then time would just go and it would go so fast. And so I learned to slice off this little piece of my consciousness that could continue mapping the brain. And like I said in the book, I don't ask me to explain that. There's things that happen that go on inside that you can't explain out here. It's a totally different world inside.
Well, if you would like to continue on after the first time you experience it, I'd like to hear more about how you've come to learn about the ability.
Yeah, I can explain the first time um, I had really tried to go through and step through into the, in out of this time. I didn't use the window man. I tried and I had connected my senses together from something that if you read in the book, you learn that it was this thing that I was led to do, and it taught me how to connect the senses together in order to do this. And it didn't work the first time. It was like pushing against a very strong wind, and I just felt like there was nothing I could do. And I remember 26 minutes of trying to push through until my brain hurt so bad that I needed to stop, that I couldn't go through anymore. And one day, on my way to the liquor store of all things, something just dawned on me, and it said, "Step into the window." And so I'm going in my car, and I'm listening to Jelly Roll's "Son of a Sinner," and I'm drinking on a Pepsi Cola, and I'm gripping the steering wheel, and I I look at the gas gauge because I know to myself that if I look at the odometer, then it may change before I get home, and I don't want to have anything visually off. The gas meter is not going to change before I get home. So I get home and I put my beer in the fridge and all of this, and I come back out and I get in the car. I start the car up, and I don't want to actually drive the car because if I drive the car, I'm afraid in my mind that I'm leaving an unmanned vehicle if this works. So I put on the Jelly Roll song, I Bluetooth it through. I'm drinking on the Pepsi Cola. I'm gripping the steering wheel. I'm looking at the gas gauge, and I awaken driving the vehicle. And I'm driving the vehicle, and I almost get hit by this blue Ford Explorer that goes right through the light. And I slam on the brakes just after, mind you, this is when I just kind of like came to because my body was seizing. That was the first time. Like I was seizing like this. And so that was a really scary thing because I could have died in that situation. But I go back to the house. I'm super excited. I don't even like go to the liquor store. I go back to the house. I run straight through the door. I go in, I open the refrigerator door, and there's no beer in the refrigerator. I look in my wallet, and the money that I had used to purchase that beer is back in my wallet. And this is the first time I realized that I'd actually stepped out of time.
Okay. So that was within the last 5 to 10 years.
Oh yeah, that was when I was 48 years old, and I'm
Okay.
50 now. So
Okay.
yeah, that was the first time that I stepped through that doorway. And then later, obviously, I stepped through the doorway again when I went back into my 9 year old body. That was something that was such a vivid memory to me that I said I have to go do this. This is something I have to try. And just like that, I was back in that body, and it details it in the book.
Is this something that you would think is more trauma based of how you learned to get to this ability? Because it seems like it's something traumatic that happened that triggered the whole thing.
Oh, you're 100% correct. It's a great question. The trauma is what started it, and it wasn't just then. Um, it didn't happen again until I was in my early to mid 20s, right there. Um, I was in a bad relationship, and I felt it going south, and I kind of did the same thing. except I wasn't crying this time. And in the book, it says I kind of felt like I was past that, and I just went into the room and I laid on the bed and I just felt this heat come over my eyes. And when the heat came over my eyes, all of a sudden, everything went dark. And when I opened my eyes again, I was in that same window man state that I was in when I was 9 years old. And so, yes, the trauma is what opened the door originally. But in doing it, it allowed me to access it at any time. I became so capable of doing it at any time based on just the fact that I had done it before. It's like I explained it like this. If John Jones goes out and gets drunk, right? He can still basically whip a bunch of people's ass. It's second nature to him. That's what happened here. It became second nature to me where I could just step in and out.
Has there ever been a time where you've tried to step in to alter what had happened?
Hmm. Oh, absolutely. There's been multiple times where I tried to step in and alter what had happened. One time, um, I was talking to a coworker, and I brought him out to the Madison Bear Garden in Chico with me to go ahead and have some lunch, and we'll just talk because I needed to get this thing off my chest. I was like, I need to get this off my chest, and he was a good friend of mine, So we started talking, and I told him everything. Now I'm not really sure whether he truly believed it or he didn't believe it, but we left that place, and we go through the red light, or not the red light. We were parked at the red light, and then we went through when it turned green, and a red Honda Civic comes through and blindsides him, and I have him right here on my lap, covered in blood. I watch him die. That was our natural timeline. I went back and fixed that. And this is one of the very rare times where I've been able to go back and actually change something like that. On multiple occasions, it hasn't worked that way. And in the end, I'll tell you something else that I tried to fix that didn't work. And it's a really crazy story.
I don't know the way that they would be able to do something like this to actually check it out, but like, have you ever had anyone like be around when you've went into this state to where they can monitor like how it happens for you or anything like that?
No, no. I have never done anything like that, and it's funny because I believe it was the Butterfly Effect 3. There's a situation where she monitors him as he goes in and does this. I've never had anyone monitor me going through this gateway, and I don't know that I want anyone to. I'm a little bit worried about what that would entail or what that would bring. Um, I but no, I can honestly say that I've never had anybody do that part of it.
I just, I hate doing it, but I have to get MRIs on my head for my brain
Mhm.
stuff. And like, I didn't know if like they would be able, if you were able to do something like that, if you were like in an MRI machine, I wonder what it would actually pick up or show if they, I don't even know how that would even work. I'm just kind of wondering.
That's very interesting because I have been looking into doing a brain scan because there are these things that happen to me when I go out, specifically like the time I did with the 6 months. I come back, and when I come back and I wasn't in the window, there were certain things that I didn't remember.
Mhm.
Okay. And so all of these things need to come back, and they do, and they come back viciously, and this is something that I call the flood. So the flood is all of these memories rushing back all at once. And if you understand, like the hippocampus is responsible for your memory creation, and it is buried deep within the temporal lobe. Now the temporal lobe is connected to both hemispheres, and both hemispheres are connected to the occipital lobe. So when all of these come flooding back, what they do is they set your brain on fire. And so for a few hours, it feels like somebody hits you over the head with a sledgehammer, and is absolutely one of the most vicious feelings. It could kill people. It's that strong, and you feel the after effects for days.
I was wondering too, like when you just mentioned that, I would be curious to know, like, if by going in there or whatever, if it's actually causing some sort of health issues. Because I know you mentioned the butterfly. I remember the first one. I've never seen any of the other ones, but I remember seeing something before, like where someone was able to, like, I don't know the movie. I'm trying to think, but like every time he went back and did something, it was like taking a little bit of peace from him, and ended up eventually was going to kill him if he kept doing it. I can't remember what movie that was.
I'm trying to think myself. I don't know.
Yeah,
I do know that there was that in the butterfly effect, though, the first one, he did experience something very similar to the flood. When I don't remember if you remember him grabbing his head and holding his head, and it, through all the memories and blood running out of his nose. It was, he was having he was having that happen too, which is really interesting. And that's honestly what led me to find the things that I found, was because in the beginning, I started looking through all sorts of movies and different things, believing that there had to be some connection between, fiction and what is real, you
mm,
know? And so I started looking through them. And when I saw that there was a flood. I saw all these things. It made sense to me, and so I started to piece things together. And that's the reason his use of a journal was something that kind of guided me. I knew a journal wouldn't work. It seemed too simple to me, but connecting all of my senses together made sense, and that's where that came from. Was learning from what I had seen. So oddly, fiction and real life can have a crossing point.
I think most fiction is influenced from something real in the first place. Someone has that idea, and if what you're talking about is an actual capability that you're able to do, I'm sure there's probably been others that have done it at some point too, and it's somehow been influenced throughout time.
Hmm. Absolutely, 100%. I agree with that statement. Um, and I will say that, like I said, each of us have a supernatural gifting. I know this. It's just about accessing it, and people don't understand that. The 33 vertebrae is called the sacred ladder. Okay, and some people call it Jacob's ladder or whatever. But at the top, there's this atlas
Hmm.
vertebrae. When you get to the atlas vertebrae, when you push the energy, the kundalini energy through there to the atlas vertebrae, it can actually pump into the pineal gland. And when it does, it decalcifies it. And when it decalcifies it, it allows you to access things that you're not capable of accessing in your natural form.
A lot of people have talked about stuff similar because they think that, what do they say? We only use like a small percentage of our brain, and the pineal
Hmm.
gland or whatever is
Yeah.
basically when it's calcified. They think that's by design to keep us from actually achieving those abilities that we've always had. So this is
Yes.
something that's kind of been a reoccurring topic when on the show, as people have talked about how to actually get in touch with that and get in tune. It's almost like, and I'm not trying to say it in the sense of what you're doing is the same, but it's almost similar to how people claim they travel the astral plane, or they get into the ability to, like, when they're in a meditative state, like they're leaving their body and they're traveling through time and everything else to a different plane of existence.
Mhm.
Most of the people believe that, again, like this is all kind of a simulation because they're able to channel and do all that. Like we're just in this version of our world, but there's other ones out there too that we're able to tap into once our mind's able to, like, our consciousness is able to open up and move from the state that we're in.
Oh, absolutely. And astral projection's a very real thing. I've had some people in my family that have been able to do that. That's not my gifting,
Mhm.
but this, however, is my gifting. And so each of us have, different ones. And I'm not entirely sure what they are. Like I don't know what other people can do,
Right.
because to be realistic, yeah, I don't think a lot of people access this.
Mm-mm.
It's a very unusual thing for somebody to reach that level where they can do that. It's basically called, like, they call it a Christ consciousness, and you
Mhm.
get to that point where you can actually manipulate things.
I've always thought about stuff like that, but I would be too afraid to ever try. And I talked to someone before that talked about how you can leave your body. And it's like, what happens if you leave your body, but you can't make it back to your body when you're in that state? Now, with you, you're not necessarily leaving your body, but
Mhm.
do you ever get concerned that you're going to get trapped while you're in the window situation? You said you've been in there for like 6 months before. Has there ever been a point to where you're afraid that you won't ever be able to get out of there?
It's that's a great question because it's the weirdest thing. Uh, like I said before, when my eyes went dark, and I just felt like everything was going out around me. And when I awaken into this like state where I'm peering out, um, to a lot of people, I think that would sound terrifying.
Hmm.
And the funny thing is you're not. There's zero fear in this case. So you just, I don't know why, but well, actually, I guess I do know why. The window man state is emotionless. There's zero emotion connected to it. So there's no excitement and certainly no fear. You fear nothing from the window man state. Now on the outside, sure. I mean, I could say, well, I could worry if I went in and something happened, but inside, zero fear. Zero fear, zero excitement, zero sadness, everything.
Is this something that you enjoy, or is it something that you kind of regret? I know that's kind of a lopsided question, but like, is this something like you wish that you didn't figure out, or is this something that you enjoy now that you were able to do this? Because I feel
I
like
feel
it
Mhm.
could be a burden on either end.
I see that. I look at it from this perspective. Um, I was guided all along the path for whatever reason. And why I was guided, I have to say that the entire thing seemed like a puzzle. And if it seemed like a puzzle, then that means that there was a creator of that puzzle.
Hmm.
And so I was meant to do this for whatever reason. I can't explain why I was meant to do this, and I don't know exactly how far this goes. Even now, traversing time is a small portion of what I do. You can read about it in the book that there's many more things that I'm actually capable of on the inside. Um, so I don't know. I believe that I was 100% made to do this, and while it does suck sometimes, and I have had moments where I felt like I don't want to do this anymore, I feel like I'm pushed to do it.
It's almost like something's calling you to do this for whatever reason. You've been given this gift, and you feel the need that you have to do it.
Absolutely,
Mm.
because there are moments where it's burdensome. I there were times where I've had my face completely split open. I've been kicked in the nuts by a horse. I had some very crazy things happen. I get attacked over and over and over again, and it's it sucks on a lot of levels. But at the same time, I know it's for a purpose. I do. I know there has to be some purpose in it, and whether that purpose is for me to change something or whether that purpose is just to teach people that there's something in you that you can do, then maybe that's it. Maybe I just unlocked this just in order to show others that there's something that they can do and wake others up.
How has it been for you talking about this with other people? Like, obviously, on my show, like this is what we talk about, stuff like this. But like to the average person that's not into stuff like this, how do people react to that? Because I know, like, if someone usually just throwing out saying they've seen a Bigfoot, people don't believe them half the time. So, how does it work
It,
for you when you talk about it?
that's interesting because I find that it is the people closest to me that seem to have the hardest time.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk to other people that aren't as close, they're fascinated and they say, "Would can you show me how do you do these things?
Right.
Please tell me." And the people closest to me have the hardest time because, as we say, you're never a prophet in your hometown. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of the case. It's like I'm not a prophet to my own hometown.
the people closest around you are typically the ones that are the hardest to convince of anything. So
Mhm.
you mentioned you talked to a friend about it. You didn't think you believed it. Is that like something you really? Is that kind of like a struggle for you that the people closest to you don't necessarily go along with it, or
Um,
you not worry about it anymore?
for me, it's like I'm done caring what, people
Hmm.
think as far as like, whether you believe me or you don't believe me, that doesn't matter to me much. Um, the guy that I told from work, the friend, it was kind of up in the air. I wasn't sure how he felt about it. It was hard to read, It wasn't sure whether he believed it or he didn't. My my own dad struggles, with it, and he was there for ESP. He was there for multiple things that happened along the way. He remembers a specific time when I was a kid, and a tiny little kid. I mean, a tiny kid. And I walked past a puddle, and I knelt down, and he looked at me and he says, "What are you doing?" And I looked up at him and I said, "I'm looking for microscopic pond life." And that blew him away. Uh, he knows he's been seeing this kind of stuff from me from the very beginning, and yet it still boggles the mind. So I I think no matter what, the people around you are always going to have the hardest time. Others, they tend to see it easier for whatever reason.
Yeah. I think for someone that's not close to this person, it doesn't
Mhm.
affect them in a sense that once they walk away from you, they go on about their business. It's the people
Mhm.
that are close to you because I deal with that with the stuff that I do with this show and everything else. Like I am known around my area as probably as a town crazy person at this point because of just the stuff that I talk about and oh, he has a podcast. Oh yeah. Like so at this point, because I live in a small town, a lot of people know about what I do.
Mhm.
And it's got a stigma. Topics that we talk about like this always have a stigma to it to where the average person doesn't necessarily always go along with it. So when you talk about weird topics, people automatically associate you with being a weirdo because you talk about
Mhm.
the weird stuff. But I think talking about these type of things are important because if you didn't talk about it, you just go along with everything that goes out there in the mainstream, life's pretty mundane and boring.
Yeah.
So it's the fascinating stuff of the unknown that's always been what's drawn me to it.
Oh, that's. I'm happy to hear that. Like people actually look at this and say, "Hey, you know what? There's all kinds of other things out there that we don't understand, and I want to understand it."
Hmm.
And that's great. I think it's great that you do this. It's fantastic because there are so many things that people don't understand.
Yeah.
And yeah, a multitude of things on every level.
So we've kind of went around everything. So for the basically for the listeners out there, what are some of the things that you've done without like spoiling your book or anything, but what are some of the things that you've actually done when you're in the window state or something you'd want to talk about to try and give them an idea of some of the other things that you've done besides just the time aspect to it?
Oh, well, okay. This is a huge one right here, and I knew that we were going to talk about this. So I'll throw this out there, and this is something that if you haven't looked into, go ahead and look into it, and you're going to find out that everything I'm saying is 100% true. Um, So at the end of Window Man, I had decided that I wasn't sure that I wanted to actually do this anymore. At the end of the book, I decided I wasn't sure, but I left it open in saying, in the words of Rocky Balboa, I didn't hear no bell, one more round. Like maybe I might actually do it. And so something happened that forced me back into this situation. There was a very, very public execution. And with this very public execution, I believed that I could stop it. And so I tried. I stepped into the situation. And this was the first time that I had ever put myself in the public forum doing something like this. This was, I mean, on the world stage. And so I stepped in, and this is where I met the darker force, which is the reason that I call the second book the darker force. So it suspended everything that I could do. There was and I'm talking about not just in like the supernatural. I'm talking about physically and everything. There were times I couldn't even move. Phone calls that I tried to make were shut down. Everything that I tried to do, there was nothing I could do to save this person. So, being an author is a gifting that I have. I said, you know what? All right, I'm I'm just going to write a book, and if the book releases before this happens, then this person will know. And so I wrote the book, published it through a small publishing company, and it released one day before the murder. And that was the best I could. I We pushed so hard to get it through. I pushed so hard to get it through. And later on, they tried to say that it was published 2 days after. None of it makes sense anyway, because I have my book Window Man right here that I wrote, and it took me 5 days to get it approved through Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're talking about a finished product, right? We're not talking about something that just got written and then got pushed through Amazon. It doesn't happen like that. You don't get a publisher for something that you just did afterwards, and all of a sudden it's 2 days later it's out there. It's impossible. It's a 100% impossibility. Okay. Now, then they go ahead and they dismiss the book as AI slop, and they say, yeah, it's no good. It's slop, and they just obliterate it from the internet. Now, if you're going to obliterate this from the internet when it has an opportunity to make money, why? I mean, AI slop can make money, right? There's a reason that they don't want you to see it. Later on, I actually found a digital copy of the book, and they had changed multitudes of things. Like there was a situation where they said that in this murder situation, and I will go into this, and I won't just leave everybody hanging, but that they ran up and put pressure on the wound, and that they ran IVs and all of these things, which we know were not true. That's not what actually happened at the event, but they do that in order to make it seem like it's not real. These were things that they changed, and I'm just going to go ahead and throw this out here right now. What I am talking about is the murder of Charlie Kirk. And I am talking about a book called The Shooting of Charlie Kirk. And it was written by someone called Anastasia J. Casey. And what I'm telling you is that I'm the author of that book. And I actually have some things where I have encoded it so that people would know. Wasn't that I wanted everyone to know, but I wanted my family at least to know that this was never going to come out. I never wanted this to come out. But at the same time, I'm kind of pissed off in the way that they handled it, you know? So my firstborn son, his name is Antonio. First two letters of his name are AN. My second-born son, his name is Carmine, and the first two letters of his name are CA, as well as my last name, which is CA, which are also the first two letters of Anastasia and Casey.
I remember that. Again, this was 6 months ago, but I remember someone on social media posting about the book, and they showed that the date on it was the day before.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember the whole AI thing, and I remember it was completely taken off the internet.
Yes.
Like I remember all of that. I saw some of that stuff because I go down the rabbit hole conspiracy group pages and on Reddit and everything else, and there was posts on there about that. So that is interesting to me.
I mean, especially since I'm telling everyone that I am quite literally moving through time, and people have asked so often about that book online. There's multiple pages where people are talking about that thing, and I am saying now that question is answered. That I'm answering it.
Is there a reason why you use the pseudonym, how it's pronounced for that name?
Because originally I didn't want anyone to know. This was never going to be something that was going to get put out there. Also, it was paid in cash from a small publishing company, and and the actual author copy is burned. It was never going to be anything that I wanted because, one, I talked about this earlier when you asked me about profiting.
Mm-hmm.
You can't profit. If you attempt to profit, it attacks you. Therefore, I could not profit off the book anyway, and I didn't want it to be traced back to me in any way. So that's the reason why, if there's questions about that, that's why.
Yeah, because I just remember when I saw that, it was literally like a day or two after the whole thing had happened. Someone had been posting that book, and there's a big old rabbit hole about the book, and there was no information about the author. People were saying the author wasn't a real person, and then that's when the whole AI thing came about. But I was thinking, even if it was AI, someone still has to program the AI to create a book. They had to put it up on Amazon. It has to go through an approval process. It's not just
Mhm.
something that they could have done instantaneously, because I've released stuff through Amazon too, and it does take several days for it to go through the processing. So for me, I was like, it's awful convenient that it comes out. The original date was the day before, and then it's shown as like 2 days afterwards. I was like, someone would have had to literally have written a book in a
Mhm.
day with AI, got everything that, like, it just, the time frame didn't match up. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
No, I mean, it 100% makes no sense. There's no way it could have went through that fast. And why did they even change the date? Nobody changes the date on when it's released, but they did here. They don't scrub things from the internet, generally speaking. They might say this book is, not available anymore or whatever, for whatever reason. But to completely scrub it, that's a little suspicious, right? That's, as we say, a little sus.
Hmm. Yeah, that is very, very
Hmm.
sus. Because I have noticed too, like if I order copies of the books that I've made, the date on them of when they were printed does change, but the actual date that it was uploaded should have never changed.
No.
But
Yeah,
so,
agreed. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. There are things that they attempt to hide, and they do for a reason. And there's a bunch of them that I'm sure you're very familiar with. Um, for example, are you familiar with Danny Goler and his experiment where he was showing that there is a code, that there literally is, and they were looking at it through red NM 65 diffracted laser. And what they did is they put the people on DMT. Now I understand that DMT is a hallucinogenic drug. We've talked about that before, but the fact is that when people have hallucinogenic drugs, they see different things. You don't all see the same thing, right?
hmm.
But everybody seemed to see the same thing. And so what I'm saying is, all of a sudden they come out and they debunk this, and they say, "Oh, this guy's a nut. This isn't true," and they make him sound like a crazy. It's not the case. He was seeing the code. And they did the same thing with Max Laughlin. If you've ever looked into him, 13-year-old kid saying that there was these different dimensions and different realities, and he ended up creating a way to create free energy. And what they did is they shut him up. All of a sudden, he's not talking anymore.
Right.
He was supposed to go to these big conferences and say things, and just no more, because that's how they do. They say you're crazy. When they can't prove that you're crazy, then they threaten you. When they threaten you, if that doesn't work, then they finish you.
Hmm. Kind of like what they did to Nikola Tesla years ago.
Yes.
Hmm.
Hmm.
It's,
Nikola Tesla. Yeah. And one of the greatest things that I loved about what he said was that if we understood the power of 369, that we would conceivably run the universe, right?
hmm.
So there's so much in those numbers, and that's actually part of, the things that I'll be teaching, in my school program, when I'm helping people to learn who they truly are.
Let's talk a little bit more about the schooling stuff before we finish this. Um, is this something you just started doing recently, or
Yes, this is a just so I haven't even released the first one yet.
okay?
So we just got on there, and I'm really looking forward to that. Should be next week when we release the first teachings.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now, is that something you're offering for free, or is it something that you're
Uh, that one, no, we're not but we're not very high priced realistically. It's There's people on there that are, a hundred and something dollars a month. We're charging $23 a month. It's just for my time to actually, create, spend my time doing it. But I just really want people to have a chance to find out who they are, and it's more about that than it is about the money. But we all have to make a living and do the things that we have to do.
Right. Yeah, I get it.
Hmm.
I've said that too. It's like I do this podcast and there's commercials that get put in here for when people listen, or there's advertisements. I don't have any control over what advertisements are placed or whatever, but it's kind of like selling out at that point because you have to make money to cover the overhead cost of doing something like this because people like to complain, but I put a lot of time, money, and energy into doing stuff like this, so I can't just keep doing it at a loss, even though I'm still at a loss. It's not as deep of a loss as it has been.
Not as deep.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We all have to, we got to make a living somehow and doing what we do. So
Right.
I understand that 100%.
Where can anyone find information about the classes that you're going to be offering?
You can go on School, the app itself, and just look up Your Supernatural 2
Okay.
or Will Cameron, and it should show up on there, and they can read about it on the actual app itself. It I haven't been advertising, outside of the app yet. We'll probably will do that in the future, but for now, Your Supernatural 2 is what it's called, and you can just go on the School app and find it.
And so by the time this episode airs, it'll probably already be available at that point because I'm usually several weeks ahead of recording schedules. So before it
Mhm.
gets released. Before we,
Okay, so everybody out there, it's already out
yeah,
there.
it should already be out there. Before we kind of wrap things up, there's a couple things I actually wanted to ask. Like, when you're doing the window man and everything, is this something that you would want to share with other people of how to maybe figure something out like that? Or you think there's too much ramifications for going and giving that a possible abilities to other people?
Well, first, I don't believe that everyone has the window man
Mhm.
or that's their gift. Uh, I believe everyone's is unique. So I don't know what their gifting would look like. I just want to help people step into it, and I do think that they're all for a use. They weren't given for no reason. And not even this one was given for no reason. This was there even with the ramifications and all of the things that I've seen, where it's tried to kill me, where it's tried to do multiple things. Um there's a reason behind it. And so there's a reason behind everyone's gifts. So yes, I want to help them unlock their gifts, believing that that's how we bring about the end of the simulation.
What is after the simulation? Have any inkling, any idea of what could possibly be after the
Um,
simulation? Like if we were to all to wake up from the simulation, like what would it be?
okay, well, I mean, I have my beliefs on that, and I believe that the darker force, I believe, are the fallen ones. I believe that present when the code was written, and that when we wake up, that we transcend this thing and see who we really are and where we really came from, and stare into the face of the creator. I believe that 100%, that this is just us being locked in something, a prison for our mind, until we actually awaken and we find out who we truly are. And I can say this, that I believe that of the 200 that are fallen, that and that's how many, that they couldn't stand against one fully awakened. It's That's how powerful we truly are, and people just don't understand that. And this is that's the thing, that we need to step into our giftings in order to exit this thing. And when we do, we're going to find out that we were far more powerful than we ever imagined.
You said there was 200 fallen. Is there a reason that you know that there's 200?
Yes. Um, there are 200 craters
Okay.
Yeah, in the earth. This is where it's one's still on fire actually, which is kind of interesting. There are 200 craters. This is where they came through.
Okay.
That's exactly what happened there.
I actually
Those are not
saw
asteroids.
I saw something, someone sent it to me about a month and a half, 2 months ago. It was actually a link to a page that did
Mhm,
an article about that the craters were actually where the fallen had came from. So,
mhm.
interesting again, we say I don't believe in coincidences. So it's you just brought something up that someone else had just said to me not long ago. So when I see things like that, it's just like, oh, okay. It's one of those things like it's not deja vu, but it's like it's something that was meant to kind of
Little
confirms.
confirmation maybe, yeah?
Yeah, it confirms some stuff for me. But well, we've been going on for a little over an hour. I try and keep these right about at an hour. So is there anything else you would like to discuss before we wrap this up?
Uh, mm, well, I mean, I could talk about, the frequency binders if you'd like to hear about that.
Yeah. Whatever you want to talk about, I'm
Yeah,
good with that.
there's, in this one, first of all, let me preface this by saying that the first 2 that I'm gonna give you, and this isn't all of them, but the first 2 that I'm gonna give you are gonna be things that are easy to understand. The 3rd one is something that will actually probably bring a whole bunch of comments, and, it probably permeate the comment section more than anything we've talked about, which is kinda crazy. But because we've said some ridiculous things. But the first thing is your job. Working a 40-hour week job where you're basically focused on only your evenings and your weekends.
Hmm.
It keeps you bound in a lower frequency where you're in frustration and all of these different things, and so you don't actually look inward because you're too focused on these moments that you have that are your peacetime. So obviously, I think a lot of people would look at that and go, "Yeah, that's true." Um, the second is your screens. I mean, your television, your computer, your phone, all of these things, they keep you bound. You're scrolling, just doom scrolling, looking through different things, and taking a hit of dopamine that we get whenever we see somebody likes our post, and that keeps you bound as well. So these things are things that need to be limited. And I understand that like a 40-hour week job for some people is just something you can't get around. It's a very tough thing. But if we could get ourselves into a place where we were making our own hours and we were doing something we loved versus something that we hate and working for somebody else, then that helps you to elevate your frequency. But the third one, the one that is most I guess it pisses most people off, and I don't really care because the truth of the matter is like I'm here to tell truth, and if truth offends people, then it offends people. Um, but animals are huge frequency binders, and chief amongst those animals are dogs. And the reason being that dogs are such frequency binders, and like I said, I won't just say it; I will explain it. Um, a dog's bark lets off a frequency that lowers your own. Okay. And anytime that you have more than one dog, you're compounding all these effects. Like, so it's way worse. Um, Number 2, a dog has a smell. Now, your olfactory is picking that up regardless of whether you go nose blind to it or not. It's still being picked up and it's lowering your frequency. You sit on your couch, you get hair on your clothes. Now you got this hair on your clothes and now you're pissed, right? So it's lowering your frequency when you're trying to go out. You got to take a lint roller to yourself. This is not something you want to do. You step outside, you step in a landmine. Okay. Now you're frustrated. Some people say, man, I'm good at cleaning it all up. So you're spending your life, picking up crap, which is also not something that is helpful to your frequency. You want to go somewhere and you can't go anywhere because nobody wants to take care of the dog or the multiple dogs in a lot of cases. So now it's like you have a couple choices. One choice is I don't go. Second choice is I pay somebody, and now that comes out of my trip fund, and now I don't get to do all the things that I wanted to do. And then you've got your third choice, which is I take them with me, and now they're lowering my frequency in a time it should be raising. And so, I like I said, I don't like to spend too much time on that, and I do want to give a disclaimer and say that I also understand for people out there that there are seeing eye dogs that do some really good things. There are bloodhounds that have found the dead bodies and things like that. There are, or tracked people down. There is the canines who work for the police department and defend police officer lives, things like that. And some heroic dogs have done some stuff. Heck, a dog saved my own dad's life, drug him in from out in the water when he was cramping up. There are heroic acts that happen, but they just weren't simply meant to be in every single house across America.
Is there anything like talked about dogs, but is there anything other than like other animal type aspects to it that have similarities to that, or is it just
You mean other animals that do the same things?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Cats, they do the same thing. I've got a cat. I didn't have a cat. My ex-wife had a cat, and it was her daughter's, and it would come over and it would stick its hand underneath the little space in the door at night, and it would smack the door.
Mm-hmm.
When you're trying to sleep. It would run and it would just jump into the blinds, in the window. It did ridiculous things. And so cats are only a little bit better than dogs. And I say that because you can generally kind of leave a cat alone,
Right.
whereas you can't really leave a dog alone. So a cat gets just that little notch being slightly better than the dog as far as that goes. And then they don't bark. They do their meowing and all that kind of stuff, but it's not as bad. But still, they're close. A lot of animals do bind the frequency, and I know it's hard for people to understand, but it's the truth.
Is it better off to not have a pet?
For all the people out there, yes. Yes, it is 100% better off not to have a pet. I've said this multiple times before, but I think that a dog or an animal is really just, especially a dog, is just looking for something that you want, and you're making it the dog. For example, you want home protection. You want something to alert you, right? It's like, well, an alarm would do that. You want protection, a gun would do that. Do you want companionship? A partner would do that. So it's not necessary in every case to have a dog, and we've made it this very normal thing for everybody to have dogs in a lot of cases.
Yeah. I have 2 dogs, 2 cats, and 2 goats.
And 2 goats, huh?
Yeah.
I would imagine the goats probably give you the least hard time, huh?
The goats are about the easiest to maintain because they live out back and eat the grass, and rarely do I have to go and do anything with them. But if they see me, they still get out there and scream that they want me to feed them, even though they've got acres of grass to go eat.
If given the choice, I would take the goats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The goats, they can be pretty funny. They're goofy, but they're also dumb, but also smart. They're the smartest dumb animal I've ever seen.
The smartest dumb animal. I love that.
They get their heads stuck in the fence, but they will figure out ways to escape that you wouldn't think they'd figure out. So it's just kind of crazy. Well, we can probably wrap this one up, but before we do, for anyone that's curious and interested, is there a way for them to reach out to you? They'd like to talk with you or something?
Sure, absolutely. I have a TikTok at Papa Will's Reviews, and I do food. I'm a food critic, so food reviews on there. And if somebody'd like to DM me, go right ahead. You can message me on school as well if that's something you'd like to do. You can look me up on Facebook. I have a page just under Will Cameron. So Instagram, all kinds of different places where people could go ahead and message me and DM me. I'm more than happy to get back to everybody.
Awesome. I will try and remember to put that in the show notes, or if you send it to me in an email, I'll just copy it and put it in there.
All right. You got it.
Well, Will, it has been a pleasure talking to you. It's very interesting, very informative, and gives you a lot to think about.
That's awesome. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it very much.
Well, you have a good night.
All right. You do the same.
Bye-bye. If you would like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, remember to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com, or you can also go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section. Just make sure to reach out and get a hold of me, and we will get something scheduled for a future episode. You can also find Tinfoil Tales on Facebook and Instagram. Just look for Tinfoil Tales Podcast. You can reach out to me that way too. Remember to share the show around. Word of mouth is the best way to help the show grow. And just remember, truth comes at cost. Are you willing to pay the price?